In the heart of New York City, Titan Industries stood as a beacon of power and wealth. Its glass walls reflected the bustling life outside, while inside, the atmosphere buzzed with the ambitions of high-ranking executives and the shuffling of important papers. Yet, amidst the bustling activity, one person remained invisible to the world: Nancy Walker. Nancy had worked for Titan Industries for over a decade, clad daily in her faded red shirt and worn-out pants. As a cleaning lady, she maneuvered her cart through the gleaming corridors, her presence barely acknowledged by the high-powered employees who rushed past her, lost in their thoughts of profits and promotions. Each day began the same. Nancy arrived early, before the offices filled with people who held little regard for her existence. The sun had barely risen, casting a soft glow through the skyscrapers as she entered the building, her cleaning cart in tow. She often thought of how the world saw her, just another faceless worker, a cog in the grand machine of Titan Industries. But Nancy knew she was more than that. With her hair neatly tied back and her head bowed, she went about her routine, dusting, mopping, and ensuring the boardroom sparkled. The rich mahogany tables gleamed under her careful attention, while the windows stood spotless, reflecting the ambition of those who occupied the building. Despite the invisible barriers between her and the executives, Nancy had her own dreams and aspirations, quietly nurtured behind her humble exterior. Her day was filled with the chatter of important meetings, the sounds of laughter echoing from lavish lunchrooms, and the clinking of glasses during celebrations for successful contracts. Yet Nancy was rarely included in any of it. She was a shadow, a silent observer in a world that seemed to move without her. But what the people of Titan Industries didn't realize was that Nancy had been watching them too. From her vantage point, she noticed the small interactions, the way managers treated their subordinates, the power struggles that unfolded in hushed tones, and the hidden tensions that simmered beneath the surface. She absorbed it all, aware that every whispered conversation and every condescending remark shaped the culture of the company. Today, however, would be different. Today, Nancy sensed a shift in the air. As she cleaned the expansive boardroom, preparing for an important meeting that had executives buzzing with anticipation, a chill ran down her spine. She couldn't quite place it, but something about the atmosphere felt charged, as if a storm was brewing on the horizon. While polishing the glass conference table, Nancy overheard snippets of conversation. Executives discussed strategies and figures, but it was the way they spoke that troubled her. The laughter, the jokes at the expense of the hard-working employees, and the arrogance with which they dismissed anyone who wasn't in their privileged circle filled her with quiet fury. In the corner of the room, David Harris, a senior manager notorious for his smug demeanor, entered with his usual entourage. The moment he walked in, Nancy felt the room's energy shift. David had a knack for belittling anyone he deemed beneath him, and Nancy had been on the receiving end of his scorn more times than she could count. Today, as he strolled in with his swagger, she braced herself for the inevitable insults. "Make sure you clean properly, Nancy," he called out, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "We can't afford any streaks on the windows during the presentation." Laughter erupted from his colleagues, their amusement at his jibe echoing through the room. Nancy kept her head down, her heart pounding in her chest. She had grown used to the derision, learning to mask her feelings behind a calm facade. But today, something inside her stirred, a determination to no longer be treated as invisible. As the meeting continued, Nancy's mind drifted back to the moments she had spent observing the executives. She knew every corner of the building, every hidden secret that would never see the light of day. And today, she felt an inexplicable urge to take a stand, to reclaim her power in a world that had constantly overlooked her. After a few more hours of cleaning, the day began to wind down. Nancy gathered her cleaning supplies, preparing to leave for the day. Just as she was about to exit the boardroom, she caught a glimpse of a photograph left behind on the table. It was a simple picture, but it felt significant somehow. With a mixture of curiosity and purpose, she picked it up. In the photograph was a group of employees from the company, all smiles and laughter, arms slung around each other in camaraderie. But what caught Nancy's attention was the woman in the corner. Her eyes held a depth of emotion that resonated with Nancy. She had seen that woman working late nights, pouring her heart into her projects, only to be overlooked during meetings. Suddenly, a wave of realization washed over Nancy. This photograph represented everything she had witnessed: the bonds formed and broken, the laughter shared, and the tears shed. It was time for the truth to emerge from the shadows. With a newfound sense of purpose, Nancy resolved to share her perspective. As she placed the photograph back on the table, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She wouldn't be silent any longer. Her story needed to be told, and she was ready to rise above the mockery and the disdain. Tomorrow would be a new beginning. The day would bring change, not just for her, but for everyone at Titan Industries. Nancy Walker, the woman in the faded red shirt, was prepared to take action. The world would soon learn the truth about her resilience and strength, and those who mocked her would finally understand the power of the person they had overlooked for far too long. The following morning at Titan Industries dawned bright and bustling. Employees flooded into the building, clad in their business attire, exchanging pleasantries and discussing strategies over their morning coffees. Nancy Walker, however, arrived with a new determination, her faded red shirt a stark contrast to the polished suits around her. As she pushed her cleaning cart through the main lobby, she could hear snippets of conversation about the annual review meeting that would take place later in the day. Whispers filled the air, talk of promotions, bonuses, and the power plays that accompanied them. Yet, amidst all the ambition and excitement, Nancy felt a calm sense of purpose. Today would be different. Today, she would find her voice. Once inside the boardroom, she set to work cleaning up after the meeting held the day before. The memories of the laughter and mockery from David and his colleagues lingered in her mind, fueling her resolve. With each sweep of the mop and each polish of the glass, she envisioned how she would reclaim her story. Nancy had a plan. She had carefully observed the dynamics of the office over the years and understood the personalities of those in power. Robert Mason, the CEO, had always been a man of principles. While many managers hid behind arrogance, Mason valued hard work and integrity, qualities Nancy had demonstrated throughout her time at Titan Industries. She would speak to him directly, letting him know the truth about what transpired in his company. As she worked, Nancy's mind wandered back to the photograph she had found. The joy and the smiles of the employees in that image stood in stark contrast to the bitterness that often filled the offices. The photograph was a reminder of what Titan Industries could be, a place where everyone was valued, regardless of their position. When the clock struck 10, the boardroom began to fill with executives preparing for the review meeting. Nancy continued her cleaning, her heart racing as the familiar faces entered the room. Among them was David Harris, who, although still recovering from the shock of yesterday's revelation, strutted in as if nothing had changed. Nancy noticed how he tried to brush off the incident with forced laughter, but his eyes betrayed him, revealing a hint of fear about what Nancy might do next. As the meeting began, Nancy paused to eavesdrop from the edge of the room, her heart pounding as Robert Mason addressed the team. His voice was strong and authoritative, commanding attention as he laid out the agenda for the day. "This is a critical moment for our company," he said, his gaze sweeping across the room. "We need to focus on collaboration and respect for one another, ensuring that everyone here understands their role in our success." Nancy took a deep breath, steeling herself. This was her chance. The moment the meeting ended, she would approach Mason, share her story, and advocate for change. She knew that if anyone could understand her perspective, it would be him. As the discussions continued, Nancy observed the dynamics of the room. Most executives sat, nodding along, while a few whispered to each other. David leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, trying to project an image of nonchalance. But deep down, Nancy knew he was nervous. The power had shifted in the last 24 hours, and she could sense that the others were beginning to recognize her significance. The meeting dragged on, and just as Nancy felt her resolve waver, the discussion shifted to employee performance and contributions. Robert turned to the team, asking, "Are we doing enough to support our staff? Are we truly valuing every member of our team?" That was the moment Nancy had been waiting for. She stepped forward, taking a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. "Excuse me, Mr. Mason," she said, her voice steady but firm. The room fell silent, all eyes turning toward her. "Who let her in here?" David hissed under his breath, his arrogance resurfacing, but Nancy ignored him. She had no time for distractions. This was about more than just herself. Robert Mason looked surprised but intrigued. "Yes, Nancy, what is it?" he asked, genuinely curious. "I have something important to share with you all," she began, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them together. "For years, I have been a part of this company, cleaning the very floors you walk on and ensuring that the environment remains welcoming. But I've also observed how you treat each other and how some people, like David, mock those who do the hard work." Gasps filled the room, and Nancy could see David's face turn crimson with embarrassment. The executives exchanged glances, caught off guard by the audacity of her words. But Nancy pressed on, her voice gaining strength. "You see me as just a cleaner, but I'm also a person who cares about this company and everyone who works here. This culture of arrogance needs to change." "Change?" David scoffed, trying to regain control of the room. "You're just a cleaner, Nancy. What do you know about running a business?" Nancy straightened her posture, a fierce determination igniting within her. "I know that every person in this company, regardless of their title, contributes to its success. You mock those below you, but it's time for you to recognize that we are all valuable." The room was charged with energy, and Nancy could feel the eyes of her colleagues shifting. It was as if a spotlight had suddenly illuminated her presence, transforming her from the invisible woman into a powerful force. Robert Mason watched intently, nodding slowly. "You make an excellent point, Nancy. We need to foster an environment where every individual feels respected and valued. Thank you for your courage in speaking up." His words hung in the air like a promise. Nancy felt the swell of hope within her as she glanced at the executives, their expressions shifting from skepticism to consideration. She was no longer just a cleaning lady. She was a voice demanding change. After the meeting, as the executives filed out, Nancy stood firm, waiting for Mason. When he approached her, she felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. "Thank you for your bravery, Nancy," he said, sincerity in his eyes. "It takes great strength to stand up and speak the truth. I would like to discuss how we can implement changes based on what you've shared." As they talked, Nancy felt the power of her voice growing. She shared her vision for a more inclusive Titan Industries, where respect and recognition would become fundamental values. The conversation flowed, and she could sense that change was on the horizon. Meanwhile, David lingered at the back of the room, listening to the discussion unfold. His face was a mask of disbelief and resentment, unable to comprehend how the woman he had belittled was now becoming a pivotal figure within the company. The power dynamics had shifted, and he realized that the very foundation of his authority was crumbling. By the end of the day, Nancy Walker had transformed from the invisible worker to a beacon of hope for everyone at Titan Industries. She had not only shared her story, but had ignited a spark of change, promising a new beginning for all employees, one where everyone was valued, regardless of their position. As Nancy left the building that day, she felt a sense of freedom wash over her. She was no longer just a cleaner. She was a catalyst for transformation, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. The faded red shirt she wore no longer symbolized invisibility. It had become a badge of honor, representing her strength and resilience. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but Nancy was ready to face them head-on, determined to ensure that her voice would be heard and that Titan Industries would rise to its full potential. A new beginning. The days that followed Nancy Walker's bold declaration marked the beginning of a significant shift at Titan Industries. With every passing moment, the ripple effects of her courage echoed through the high-rise halls, igniting conversations that had long been stifled by arrogance and ignorance. Nancy was no longer just an unseen cleaner. She had become a symbol of change. As Nancy arrived at the office the next morning, she was greeted with a mixture of curiosity and respect from her colleagues. Whispers filled the air, and for the first time, she felt a sense of recognition in their gazes. The executives who had once ignored her presence now acknowledged her with nods and tentative smiles. It was a surreal experience for Nancy, who had spent so many years in the shadows. The atmosphere in the office was different as well. There was a palpable sense of anticipation, a tension hanging in the air as employees gathered in small groups, discussing the implications of what had happened in the boardroom. Nancy could hear snippets of conversations about respect, acknowledgement, and the importance of valuing every employee's contribution. She smiled to herself, feeling a warm glow of pride for her part in this transformation. However, not everyone was pleased with this change. David Harris, still reeling from the shock of losing his position and influence, was plotting his revenge. Though he had been publicly dismissed by Robert Mason, his arrogance had not vanished. Instead, it festered, driving him to seek ways to undermine Nancy's newfound power. He couldn't stand the thought of a cleaner having the upper hand in a corporate environment where he had reigned supreme for years. David convened with a few like-minded colleagues who felt threatened by Nancy's rise. "We can't let her take over this company," he declared, his voice low and filled with malice. "She doesn't understand the nuances of corporate politics. She's just a janitor who got lucky." His peers nodded, emboldened by his words. They agreed to spread doubt about Nancy's capabilities, planting seeds of skepticism among the executives who had begun to see her in a different light. They would try to discredit her ideas before they could take root. Meanwhile, in the midst of this brewing conflict, Nancy met with Robert Mason to discuss her vision for Titan Industries. She entered his office, a bright, airy space filled with plants and warm light. Mason stood behind his desk, looking over some reports, but his expression shifted to one of encouragement as Nancy walked in. "Good morning, Nancy. I've been looking forward to our meeting," he said, gesturing for her to take a seat. "I want to hear your thoughts on how we can improve our workplace culture." With a deep breath, Nancy began to outline her ideas. "I believe we need to implement a mentorship program where senior employees can guide those in entry-level positions. It would foster collaboration and respect across all levels of the company," she suggested. Mason nodded thoughtfully, jotting down notes. "That's an excellent start. What about training sessions focused on empathy and leadership? We need to cultivate an environment where everyone feels heard and valued." Nancy's heart soared as they brainstormed together. The conversation flowed freely, filled with ideas that sparked excitement in both of them. For the first time in years, Nancy felt her voice mattered, that her insights could shape the company she had watched over from the sidelines. By the time the meeting concluded, Nancy had developed a comprehensive proposal that would be presented to the board in the coming weeks. As she left Mason's office, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The future was bright, and she was determined to make Titan Industries a place where every employee could thrive, regardless of their position. However, unbeknownst to her, David was already executing his plan. He began spreading rumors about Nancy, suggesting that her rise to prominence was merely a facade. "She's just trying to get sympathy," he would say to his colleagues. "Let's see how long it lasts once the initial excitement wears off." The whispers took root, and soon, doubts began to surface among some of the executives. They questioned Nancy's qualifications, suggesting that perhaps she wasn't cut out for the corporate world. David's influence had not waned entirely, and he knew how to play the political game, twisting perceptions to serve his interests. One afternoon, as Nancy was preparing to leave for the day, she overheard two executives discussing her proposal in hushed tones. "Do you really think she can handle this?" one of them asked. She's a cleaner, after all. Can we trust her judgment? Nancy's heart sank at the implications of their words. The very thing she had fought for was now being threatened. She realized that she would need to confront these doubts head-on. With newfound determination, she decided to prepare for her presentation with Mason in a way that would leave no room for skepticism. That night, Nancy stayed up late, poring over industry reports, case studies, and best practices from companies that had successfully transformed their work environments. She meticulously crafted her presentation, incorporating data that would bolster her arguments and demonstrate the benefits of her proposed changes. When the day of the board presentation arrived, Nancy stood in front of the large glass doors of the boardroom, her heart racing. She felt a mix of excitement and trepidation as she adjusted her faded red shirt, reminding herself of the journey that had led her here. This was her moment to shine, and she would not let David's machinations deter her. As the board members filed into the room, Nancy took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. Robert Mason entered last, offering her an encouraging nod. She stepped forward, ready to present her vision to the very people who had once dismissed her. "Thank you all for being here today," Nancy began, her voice firm and clear. "I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the future of Titan Industries and how we can create a more inclusive and respectful workplace." As she spoke, she could see the executives leaning in, some taking notes. She presented her ideas with passion, highlighting the positive impacts of mentorship programs, training sessions, and the importance of valuing every employee's contribution. Halfway through her presentation, Nancy noticed David Harris sitting at the back, his arms crossed and a scowl on his face. He was clearly unhappy, but Nancy refused to let his negativity affect her. She focused on the faces in front of her, those who were beginning to see her as more than just a cleaner. After her presentation, Robert Mason encouraged questions. To her surprise, several executives asked thoughtful inquiries, genuinely interested in her ideas. Nancy felt a rush of exhilaration as she responded confidently, drawing on the data and insights she had gathered. But then, David raised his hand. "Nancy, while your ideas sound good in theory, how can we trust someone who has never held a managerial position to lead such initiatives?" His words dripped with condescension, aimed at undermining her credibility. The room fell silent, tension hanging in the air, but Nancy had anticipated this challenge. She took a moment to compose herself, then replied, "I may not have held a traditional managerial position, David, but I spent years observing how Titan Industries operates. I understand the challenges we face, and I know how to connect with employees on every level. My experience as a cleaner gives me unique insights into the culture here that many executives overlook." The room shifted. People began to nod, seeing the truth in her words. Robert Mason stepped in, backing Nancy. "We need voices like Nancy's in leadership roles. She brings a perspective that can guide us toward a more inclusive future." As the meeting continued, Nancy felt a swell of support from her colleagues. She had taken a stand, and she was not backing down. By the end of the presentation, David sat in silence, visibly deflated. His attempts to undermine her had backfired. And now, the focus was on Nancy's vision for change. The meeting adjourned, and Nancy walked out feeling empowered. She had faced her fears and challenged the status quo. With Robert Mason's backing and the support of her colleagues, she was ready to transform Titan Industries into a place where respect and collaboration reigned supreme. But even as she celebrated this victory, Nancy knew that the battle wasn't over. David Harris would not accept defeat so easily. She would need to remain vigilant, prepared to confront the challenges that lay ahead as she continued to pave the way for a brighter future. The pushback. In the days that followed Nancy's powerful presentation, Titan Industries buzzed with a mix of excitement and tension. Employees began to discuss Nancy's proposed changes, many expressing their support for a more inclusive workplace. Conversations in the break room shifted from casual gossip to serious discussions about how to implement mentorship programs and training sessions. The air was electric with hope and determination. However, behind the scenes, David Harris was plotting his next move. He refused to accept that a cleaning lady could outmaneuver him. In his mind, he was still the senior manager, and it was time to take back control. He rallied a small group of disgruntled executives, those who felt threatened by Nancy's rise and the changes she represented. "Listen up," David said, leaning over the conference table in a dimly lit corner office. "We can't let this go on. Nancy might have had her moment in the spotlight, but we can still make her look incompetent. If we can undermine her confidence and portray her ideas as reckless, we might just be able to regain our standing." The others around the table exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement. David laid out a plan. They would start by planting doubt about the feasibility of Nancy's initiatives. They would create scenarios where her ideas appeared to fail, highlighting any missteps in implementation. With subtlety and cunning, they would work to chip away at her credibility until the executive's faith in her vision was compromised. Meanwhile, Nancy was not unaware of the brewing discontent. As she continued her work, she noticed the furtive glances of some employees, whispers that ceased when she approached. But instead of retreating, she chose to confront the discomfort head-on. If she was going to lead change, she needed to create an environment where honesty and support flourished. One afternoon, Nancy organized a town hall meeting for all employees to discuss her ideas. She wanted to ensure that everyone felt included in the process, fostering an atmosphere of collaboration and transparency. "This is not just about me," she announced in her opening remarks. "It's about all of us. Our voices matter, and together, we can create a workplace where everyone is valued." The turnout was impressive. Employees from every level attended, eager to voice their thoughts and ideas. Nancy listened intently as team members shared their experiences and suggestions. She took notes, encouraged dialogue, and fostered a sense of unity. This was the environment she envisioned, one where respect and collaboration replaced arrogance and disdain. However, David and his allies were not idle. They circulated their own narrative, suggesting to the executives that Nancy's initiatives were merely an emotional response rather than a well-thought-out plan. They painted her as someone who could not possibly understand the complexities of running a large corporation. "She's just a cleaner," David would say, feigning concern. "We can't risk our company's future on the whims of someone who doesn't even know how to read a balance sheet." As the weeks rolled on, Nancy began to notice that some executives who had initially supported her were starting to pull back, influenced by David's whispers. It became clear to her that she needed to take action, not just for herself, but for everyone who believed in the vision she was trying to create. She could not let the negative influence of a few powerful people derail the progress she had made. Determined to reclaim the narrative, Nancy decided to gather more information. She had spent years observing the inner workings of Titan Industries, but now it was time to leverage that knowledge strategically. She reached out to the employees, asking for their insights on the challenges they faced and the changes they wished to see. During these conversations, Nancy discovered a wealth of stories. Employees who felt their contributions were overlooked, individuals who had ideas for improvement but were silenced by fear of ridicule. With each story, her resolve strengthened. She would create a culture where everyone felt safe to voice their opinions, a culture that welcomed innovation and collaboration. One evening, while Nancy was finishing her shift, she bumped into Emma Brown, the new hire who had been an ally since Nancy's rise. Emma approached her with excitement. "I've been hearing some amazing feedback from our colleagues. People are really starting to rally behind you. We should organize a presentation to highlight everyone's ideas. It could counter the negative narrative David is spreading." Nancy's eyes lit up at the suggestion. "That's a brilliant idea, Emma. We need to showcase the potential of our employees, and the best way to do that is to share their stories and contributions with the executives. If we can create a presentation that emphasizes the importance of teamwork and respect, we might just be able to shift the tide back in our favor." Over the next few weeks, Nancy and Emma worked tirelessly to compile stories from various employees, highlighting their experiences and contributions. They crafted a presentation that not only showcased the workforce's talents, but also demonstrated the tangible benefits of fostering a respectful environment. As they prepared, Nancy felt a renewed sense of purpose. The negativity surrounding her had transformed into motivation, and she was determined to not only prove herself, but also uplift those around her. "We're not just cleaning up messes anymore, Emma," Nancy said, her voice filled with conviction. "We're making history." The day of the presentation arrived, and Nancy was a bundle of nerves. As she stood before the executives once again, she felt the weight of expectation upon her shoulders. The room was filled with familiar faces, some supportive, others skeptical. But she wouldn't let that deter her. She took a deep breath and launched into her presentation. "Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for allowing us to share these stories," Nancy began, her voice steady. "Today, we want to showcase the real heart of Titan Industries, our employees. These are the individuals who drive our success and keep this company running." As she introduced each employee and shared their stories, Nancy could see the shift in the room. People began to nod in agreement, recognizing the talent and potential that existed beyond the polished boardrooms. David Harris, however, sat with his arms crossed, his scowl deepening with each word that left Nancy's mouth. When Nancy finished, she opened the floor for questions. To her surprise, many executives spoke up, expressing their gratitude for the stories shared and the insights provided. "This is exactly what we need to focus on," one director stated. "Our people are our greatest asset, and we've overlooked that for too long." The atmosphere began to shift, and Nancy could sense that David was losing his grip. His previous tactics of undermining her were failing as her words resonated with the audience. Just when Nancy thought the tide was turning, David decided to speak up. "While I appreciate the sentiment, we need to remember that running a successful business requires more than just stories. We need numbers, results, and efficiency. Emotions don't build a company." His words hung in the air like a dark cloud, momentarily overshadowing Nancy's achievements. But she was ready for this. "I understand your point, David," she replied, her voice calm but firm. "But what if I told you that valuing our employees and fostering a respectful culture will ultimately lead to better results and efficiency? Happy employees are productive employees." The room erupted into discussion, and Nancy could feel the momentum shifting again. People began voicing their agreement, and even Robert Mason chimed in. "Nancy's right. We cannot ignore the human element in our business strategy. It's time we put our employees first." As the discussion continued, David's face grew darker. The room was turning against him, and he could sense his influence waning. Despite his efforts to maintain his facade of control, he was losing ground, and Nancy Walker was at the forefront of this revolution. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that Nancy had not only defended her position, but had rallied support for her vision. The executives were eager to implement changes that would enhance employee morale and productivity. David sat in silence, realizing that his time at Titan Industries was quickly coming to an end. As Nancy left the boardroom, Emma caught up with her, beaming. "You did it, Nancy. You really did it. Everyone is on board with your ideas." Nancy smiled, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. "This is just the beginning, Emma. We have so much work ahead of us, and together we can make a real difference here." But as they walked away, Nancy knew that while she had made great strides, David's influence wouldn't fade easily. The power dynamics had shifted, but the battle was far from over. She would need to remain vigilant, ready to confront any challenges that came her way. And so, with each passing day, Nancy Walker stood tall, determined to shape the future of Titan Industries and ensure that everyone, regardless of their title, would be treated with the respect they deserved. Resistance and resilience. As the weeks passed, Titan Industries underwent a noticeable transformation. Nancy Walker, with the support of Robert Mason and Emma, spearheaded initiatives that began to redefine the corporate culture. Employees were engaged in the new mentorship programs, workshops on empathy and teamwork flourished, And for the first time in years, the voices of the staff were being heard. The once oppressive atmosphere began to lighten, replaced by a sense of community and collaboration. However, change rarely comes without its challenges, and David Harris was not ready to concede defeat. Although publicly silenced, he had been strategizing behind the scenes, seeking alliances with those still clinging to the old ways. He was determined to undermine Nancy's efforts and reclaim his position of power. One afternoon, as Nancy was wrapping up a meeting with her team, she received a call from Robert Mason. "Nancy, we need to talk. Can you come to my office?" His voice was serious, prompting a knot of apprehension to form in her stomach. "Of course, I'll be right there," she replied, quickly gathering her notes and making her way to his office. When she arrived, Robert looked up from his desk, concern etched on his features. "I wanted to discuss some troubling reports I've received," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "It seems that some of the senior management is pushing back against the changes you've implemented." Nancy's heart sank. She had sensed a resistance brewing, but hadn't expected it to manifest so quickly. "What are they saying?" she asked, her voice steady despite her rising anxiety. "David is at the center of it. He's been spreading rumors, suggesting that your initiatives are impractical and that the company is losing its focus on results," Robert explained. "He's trying to rally support from others who feel threatened by your rise." Nancy took a deep breath, her mind racing. She had anticipated some backlash, but had hoped that the majority of employees would embrace the new culture. "What can we do?" she asked, determined not to let David's machinations derail the progress they had made. "We need to show everyone the benefits of the changes you've introduced. If we can gather concrete evidence that supports your vision, we can counter David's narrative," Robert said. "I believe in what you're doing, Nancy, and I think the data will speak for itself." With renewed purpose, Nancy began to formulate a plan. She decided to gather testimonials from employees about the positive impact of the new initiatives, showcasing how the culture shift was affecting morale and productivity. Emma eagerly volunteered to assist her, and together they set up interviews with various staff members. Over the next few days, Nancy and Emma met with employees across departments, listening to their stories of transformation. They recorded heartfelt testimonials that captured the essence of what was changing within Titan Industries. One employee shared how she felt more empowered to speak up in meetings, while another discussed how the mentorship program had helped him develop skills he never thought he could achieve. As they compiled the footage, Nancy felt a sense of pride swelling in her chest. Each story was a testament to the strength of community and the power of respect. She knew that if they presented this evidence effectively, they could shift the narrative back in their favor. However, David was not idle. Learning about Nancy's plan, he decided to escalate his efforts to undermine her. He began to spread whispers not only about Nancy's initiatives, but also about her character. "She's just trying to gain sympathy," he would say. "Her cleaning days are long behind her, and now she's playing the victim." This time, Nancy was prepared. With Robert's backing, she scheduled a presentation to the entire company, including the executive team. She intended to reveal the testimonials and demonstrate the undeniable benefits of the changes they had implemented. As the date approached, she spent every waking moment perfecting her presentation, ensuring she was ready to face any objections that might arise. On the day of the presentation, the atmosphere in the boardroom was charged with anticipation. Employees filled the seats, and the air buzzed with excitement. Nancy stood at the front, her heart pounding with a mix of nerves and determination. She looked out at the crowd, including David, who sat in the back with an air of disdain. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice strong. "I'm excited to share the impact of the changes we've made at Titan Industries and to showcase the voices of our employees." As she played the testimonials, the room fell silent, captivated by the stories. Employees who had once felt voiceless spoke with passion about how Nancy's initiatives had changed their lives for the better. Laughter, tears, and nods of agreement filled the room, and for a moment, Nancy could see the unity that had been building over the past few months. But David wasn't ready to let go. As the video concluded, he raised his hand, his expression a mix of sarcasm and challenge. While these stories are touching, we need to focus on the bottom line. What's the actual data behind these changes? Can we really trust these anecdotal experiences? Nancy felt the tension in the room shift. She had anticipated this, but she needed to remain composed. "David, these testimonials are only a part of the picture," she replied. "But I have also been compiling data on employee performance and engagement since we initiated these changes. If you allow me, I can show you the numbers that reflect the impact of this culture shift." With that, she presented a series of charts and graphs that illustrated the increase in productivity, employee satisfaction scores, and overall morale. The data was compelling, and Nancy could feel the tide beginning to turn in her favor. As she spoke passionately about the importance of a respectful workplace, she could see doubt creeping into the expressions of her colleagues. They were starting to recognize that Nancy's vision was not only noble but also beneficial to the company's future. David, however, was not done. "But what about the costs? What about the efficiency of our operations?" he pressed. "Can we afford to put so much emphasis on feelings and not focus on the bottom line?" Nancy took a deep breath, ready to confront his challenge head-on. "I believe that by investing in our employees and fostering a positive culture, we can actually improve our bottom line. A happier workforce is a more productive workforce. Studies show that companies with engaged employees outperform their competitors." As the meeting continued, Nancy stood firm against David's challenges, countering each argument with well-researched evidence and real-life stories. With every passing moment, she felt her confidence grow. The room was shifting, and she could sense that her colleagues were beginning to see David for what he truly was, a man clinging to outdated beliefs and fearful of change. As the presentation wrapped up, Robert Mason stood to address the room. "Thank you, Nancy, for your dedication and vision. This meeting has reinforced the need for a cultural shift at Titan Industries. I believe we are on the brink of something great, and with Nancy's leadership, we will get there." The applause that followed was thunderous, echoing in the boardroom like a promise of change. Nancy felt a surge of relief and joy wash over her. She had faced down the odds and emerged victorious, but she knew that this was just the beginning. As people began to file out of the room, Nancy caught David's eye. The disdain he had shown before had been replaced with a look of resignation. It was clear that he had underestimated her strength, and now he was left to reckon with the consequences of his actions. Feeling triumphant, Nancy turned to Emma, who was beaming with pride. "You did it, Nancy. You stood up to him and showed everyone what you're capable of." "I couldn't have done it without you, Emma. Your support means the world to me," Nancy replied, gratitude swelling in her heart. But as Nancy basked in the glow of her success, she knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. David's influence would still linger, and she would need to remain vigilant. But now she felt empowered, supported by her colleagues, and equipped with the knowledge that change was not only possible but already happening. With renewed determination, Nancy set her sights on the future. She was ready to lead Titan Industries toward a new era, one where respect, collaboration, and genuine acknowledgement of every employee's worth were the cornerstones of the company's culture. A new era. In the weeks that followed the pivotal presentation, Titan Industries began to transform in ways that Nancy Walker had only dared to dream. The culture was shifting from one of disdain and arrogance to one that celebrated inclusivity, respect, and collaboration. Employees who had previously felt undervalued started to find their voices, eager to contribute their ideas and solutions. It was an awakening that had been long overdue. As Nancy stepped into her office for the first time, she felt a mix of emotions wash over her: excitement, fear, and an overwhelming sense of purpose. The modest room had been freshly decorated with motivational posters, and a large window offered a view of the bustling city below. It was a stark contrast to the cleaning closet she had occupied for so many years. She could hardly believe how far she had come. From the woman in the faded red shirt, invisible to her colleagues, to the majority shareholder and now a respected leader at Titan Industries. Her transformation was not just a personal victory. It represented the potential for change within the entire organization. However, Nancy was acutely aware that her journey was not complete. David Harris remained a threat. Though he had been removed from his position, whispers of dissent still floated through the halls of Titan. Some employees, feeling lost without their old power structures, were resistant to the new changes. Nancy understood that for this transformation to take hold, she needed to engage them, to show them that they could be part of something greater. Determined to address these concerns head-on, Nancy scheduled a series of workshops designed to facilitate open discussions among employees at all levels. The goal was to foster understanding, break down barriers, and build a sense of community. She wanted to ensure that everyone felt included in the journey ahead, and that the voices of those who had previously been overlooked would be amplified. The first workshop took place in the company's large auditorium, which had been filled to capacity. Employees from various departments gathered, some eager to participate while others appeared hesitant. Nancy stood at the front of the room, a bright smile on her face, determined to create a welcoming atmosphere. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice steady. "Today is about us, about all of you. I want to hear your thoughts, your ideas, and your concerns. This is a safe space where we can talk about the future of Titan Industries together." As she spoke, Nancy could see the initial tension in the room begin to dissipate. Employees exchanged glances, and some even nodded in agreement. They were hungry for change, but many had felt silence for far too long. The workshop began with icebreaker activities designed to help employees connect on a personal level. As laughter filled the auditorium, Nancy felt a wave of hope wash over her. This was what she had envisioned: a team united, working together to shape a better future. As the discussions progressed, Nancy encouraged attendees to share their experiences, both positive and negative, regarding the workplace culture. The stories that emerged were powerful. Stories of ambition stifled, ideas dismissed, and the emotional toll of feeling undervalued. Each voice added to the growing tapestry of shared experiences, illuminating the need for a fundamental change within the organization. One woman spoke about how she had felt intimidated in meetings, often cut off before she could finish her thoughts. "I used to think my ideas didn't matter," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But seeing Nancy stand up and speak her truth has inspired me to share my voice too." As the workshop continued, Nancy listened intently, offering support and validation to each speaker. She encouraged them to see their value and recognize that every individual brought something unique to the table. "Together, we are stronger," she reminded them. "Every idea counts, and I want each of you to feel empowered to share yours." The workshop concluded with a sense of camaraderie that was palpable in the air. Employees left the auditorium buzzing with renewed energy, ready to contribute to the collective vision of Titan Industries. Nancy felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing that they were moving in the right direction. However, as the days turned into weeks, Nancy remained vigilant. David Harris had not vanished completely from the landscape of Titan Industries. Though he was no longer in a position of power, Nancy learned that he was still networking and seeking out allies among those who resisted change. His attempts to undermine her leadership were subtle but persistent. One afternoon, Nancy overheard a conversation between a few employees at the coffee machine. They were discussing an upcoming project and expressing doubts about Nancy's ability to lead effectively. "I don't think she really understands how to run a business," one of them said dismissively. "She's just a cleaner who got lucky." The words stung, but Nancy refused to let them deter her. She knew that changing perceptions took time, and she had to remain steadfast in her mission. To counter the negativity, she decided to organize a series of success stories, spotlighting the achievements of her colleagues who had embraced the new culture. By showcasing these successes, she hoped to build confidence and demonstrate that everyone's contributions mattered. In the following weeks, Nancy and Emma collaborated to create a weekly newsletter that highlighted the positive changes within the company, featuring employee achievements, testimonials, and updates on new initiatives. Each edition celebrated the hard work of individuals who were stepping up and embracing the cultural shift. The newsletter quickly gained popularity. Employees eagerly awaited each new edition, and it became a powerful tool for building morale and community. With each success story shared, Nancy could see the tide beginning to turn. More people started to recognize the potential for growth and collaboration that had once been overshadowed by the old guard. Yet David was still scheming. As Nancy worked to build a positive environment, he sought to create division. He began to spread rumors about the financial viability of Nancy's initiatives, claiming that her changes would cost the company dearly and jeopardize jobs. His words echoed in the minds of some employees who had initially supported Nancy but now felt apprehensive about the future. As Nancy prepared for another workshop, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. She knew she had to address these rumors head-on. The following meeting was critical. It was time to reassure everyone about the direction the company was taking and the financial soundness of their initiatives. In her opening remarks, Nancy addressed the elephant in the room. "I understand there are concerns about the costs of implementing our new initiatives," she said, her tone calm yet firm. "I want to assure you all that we have conducted thorough analyses and projections, and I am confident that investing in our employees will yield significant returns. A satisfied workforce leads to increased productivity and lower turnover rates. This is not just a moral obligation. It's a smart business strategy." David sat at the back, arms crossed, his expression a mix of skepticism and irritation. Nancy could feel his eyes on her, but she refused to let him shake her confidence. "I want to hear your thoughts on this. If you have questions or concerns, please speak up. We're all in this together, and your voices matter." As the discussion unfolded, more employees began to express their support, sharing their own experiences of growth and empowerment since the cultural shift began. The tide was shifting, and Nancy could see the doubt in David's eyes as the room filled with optimism and energy. However, David wasn't about to give up easily. After the meeting, he cornered Nancy in the hallway, his tone confrontational. "You really think you can keep this up? You're just a cleaning lady who got lucky. You're out of your depth, Nancy." With steely determination, Nancy met his gaze. "I may have started as a cleaning lady, David, but I'm not just that anymore. I've earned my place here, and I'm going to ensure that everyone in this company understands their worth. You may underestimate me, but I'm not going anywhere." The confrontation only fueled David's resentment. He vowed to find a way to undermine Nancy's efforts, convinced that she would ultimately fail. But unbeknownst to him, Nancy was gaining traction and building a loyal following. Employees were inspired by her resilience, and the momentum of change continued to grow. One evening, Nancy received an unexpected call from Robert Mason. "Nancy, I have some good news," he said, his voice filled with excitement. "The board has decided to support your initiatives fully. We're allocating a budget for further development of the programs you proposed." Overwhelmed with joy, Nancy felt a sense of relief wash over her. "Thank you, Robert. This means so much. I truly believe we can create something special here." "Yes, and with the support of the board, we're planning to roll out a comprehensive training program for all employees, emphasizing the values of respect, teamwork, and accountability. I want you to lead this initiative, Nancy," he added. "You've shown exceptional leadership skills, and I believe you are the right person for this role." The news ignited a fire within Nancy. She was ready to take on this challenge and lead the company toward a brighter future. With the backing of Robert and the board, she felt emboldened to continue her fight for equality and respect within Titan Industries. As she prepared to announce the new initiatives to her colleagues, she knew that challenges lay ahead. David would undoubtedly retaliate, and there would be hurdles to overcome. But she felt a sense of unity among her coworkers that she had never experienced before. When Nancy stepped into the auditorium for the announcement, The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Employees filled the seats, eager to hear about the new programs and what it meant for their future. Nancy took a deep breath, standing taller than ever, ready to share her vision. Today marks a new chapter for Titan Industries. She began, her voice resonating with passion. We are investing in our greatest asset, each and every one of you. We will create an